Hello, I'm Chuck Rowe, and to my right is my fellow interviewer, Chris Bizard. We're both members of the Paradise Citizens Alliance. Welcome to our Paradise Citizens Alliance interviews of candidates for nonpartisan local elective office serving the Paradise community. These interviews are meant for you, the voters, to learn more about the candidates, their positions on the issues, and to encourage you to vote on November the 8th. And by voting, exercise one of your greatest privileges and rights as a citizen in our democracy. All these interviews will be posted on our website at paradiseca.org for you, the voter, to access online and view from October the 8th right up to the election on November the 8th. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest, Steve Culleton, current member of the Paradise Town Council. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Chuck. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for being here.
I'd like to lead off and ask you to just tell us a little bit about your background.
My background? Well, I'm retired now. I've been on the City Council since 2004. It's been a real privilege to serve the citizens of Paradise. I worked as a safety director for the Paradise Post printing company and the Paradise Post newspaper for 15 years. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, a little community called San Lorenzo, and I moved here in 1981. And I've had a wonderful time since then. I'm married, raised a granddaughter, and my wife and I are both retired now, living the good life in Paradise.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, thanks for being here. You talked a little bit about how long you've been on the council. Tell us again how long you've served on the town council and why you decided to run for re-election. Well,
thanks, Chris. Originally, I was elected in 2004. I wanted to get involved, and at the time, Chuck Rowe was our city manager, and I asked him about getting on a planning commission or something, and I read the newspaper in 2004, and it said there were 3 seats available and there were only 2 people running. So I thought, well, there's a way to get involved. So I took out the papers to run that year, and the time I turned in my paperwork, there were 7 people running for those 3 seats. I was elected that year, and I've run twice since then because I enjoy the job. I really look at it as truly being a public servant. It's been both educational and interesting for me to study the issues and help make decisions for our town to prosper. As we went along, when I ran the second term, we were going through some difficult times with the economy downturn and all, and I thought it was important to have some continuity on the council to get through that, and we managed to get through that with good leadership and an absolutely wonderful team. I decided to run again for this 3rd time. I'm getting older, but I wanted to run this time primarily because we have some very important things coming up. Of course, everybody knows that we're working on a sewer project. This has been going on for a number of years, but we have some really good progress we're making on that now. Also, we have a few things in senior management. We're going to have some turnover in the next couple of years. We'll have a police chief that'll be retiring within the next 2 years, and then shortly after that, our city manager possibly will retire. Their contract will be up a year or 2 after that. So I think it's important in replacing those folks I want to be a part of that. I've been a part of replacing the police chief in the past, and I just think it's important to have some continuity on the council, some people with some historical background as we move into those fields.
Steve, in the years you've served on the council, what do you consider your greatest accomplishment?
Probably learning when to keep my mouth shut. No, actually, I think that my platform from 2004 continuing to today has been that I will ask tough questions, I will study the issues, and I'll tell people the truth. And that's what I've tried to do the 12 years I've served. I think probably one of the biggest accomplishments, there have been a couple, but one of them naturally was doing the garbage franchise, which initially started off to be a joint venture between us and the county and include the Paradise Pines area. The county backed out of that, but we went ahead with that. It was a very tough decision to make for our citizens, but I think that it's proven to be over the last 10 years absolutely a real beneficial decision that we made for all of the citizens of Paradise. The other one is getting through the downturn of 2009 and everything, staying solvent, both with your leadership and our new town manager. I mean, We lost some people during then. We had to downsize from 100 plus full-time employees. We're down to about 68 now. But the citizens haven't suffered any loss of services or anything as a result of that. We have a really dedicated staff. We're a little community in the Ridge, and we don't pay as much as some of the big cities. So it's been difficult to recruit and retain people. But the fact that we've been successful in doing that, even with our limited resources, the fact that we survived the economic downturn, which was terrible. I mean, it was hard on everybody. And we were on the brink of insolvency at one point, but we made it through that by and I think that, working together with my colleagues and the staff and our employees, which is what saved us. And now we're starting to, we're solvent. We've had a balanced budget for the last 3 years. This year was the first year in a number of years we have long-term commitments in our labor negotiations, and we gave raises to our employees for the first time in a long time.
Thank you, Steve.
If you are re-elected to the town council, what changes would you like to see?
What changes would I like to see? I'd like to see more people come to our meetings. That would be helpful, although they're televised now, so I think that more people do participate. I'd like to see us have, one of my big issues is public safety. One of the biggest complaints I get as an elected official is about traffic, about people speeding, not just on Skyway, but all over town. I get complaints from citizens on Nunley, on Pence Road. I've witnessed it myself. We need more police officers so that I can have a dedicated traffic officer, at least one, if not more. We've had one in years past. It's been a number of years, but I think it's essential. Within the last 2 years, our town engineer did a study, and we lowered the speed limit as you exit town from Neal Road to the town limits from 50 miles an hour, which is essentially a residential zone. It's 4-lane road, but it's a residential zone. We lowered it to 45 miles an hour. I follow buses going down the road at 50 plus miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. People are doing 60 miles an hour before they hit the edge of town. When they lowered the speed, the speed limit on Skyway, Lower Skyway, the reason that it changed the culture of the people was because the CHP, which governs that, they patrolled that and they wrote tickets. And I think that it doesn't do any good to pass a law if you don't have the ability to enforce it. We can't change the culture. People drive way too fast in town, and so that would be one of my biggest concerns. I've shared it with everybody. I want a traffic officer.
You may have touched on this in some of your answers already, but what do you believe are the biggest challenges facing the town both now and in the future? Right
now, the sewer. And I've had citizens say, well, wait a minute, if we put a sewer in and then it'll bring development and then we won't have, Paradise won't be what it is. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think having a sewer, at least in the commercial areas of our downtown, will allow us to grow. One of the realities is we're a bedroom community essentially on a dead-end road. Even though they've paved the Skyway now all the way through to Butte Meadows, but there's not much in the way of commercial development above us in the Pines, and we're real limited in our commercial development, the fact we have no sewer. Mm-hmm. So, you have 20,000+ people driving through town every day, and we've fixed it to where they can stop and park now safely and get out and spend money, but they don't. People, they come down to Chico to spend their money and do all of their shopping. So if we have a sewer, it'll allow us to develop restaurants, hotels, other types. It'll bring in the possibility of more development, which will hopefully create bigger economy. Right now, we just live on what little bitty property tax we get, and the sales tax, which is, again, very limited because people, we have no car dealerships in Paradise. We have no big department stores. Mm-hmm. So I think that sewer is probably one of the key issues that we have.
Well, you've already answered the question on what's your position on the sewer.
Oh,
even with the feasibility study not coming in until sometime in November, right. You're basically in support of it. So.
I'm in support of the sewer, but there's a couple of things. I know that it's to create the district. I understand how hard it is to get the general right. public to buy into things, especially when there's change involved and when there's a potential for it reaching in their pocketbooks. Mm-hmm. somebody that's an out-of-town owner, which we have a number of that own commercial property, there's a real value because now suddenly their property could increase as many as 3 or 4-fold, and the consultants are pointing some of those things out. To somebody that just has a little 40-year-old house somewhere within the district that pays $35 a year for their septic permit, and it only has to be pumped for $200 or $300
Right.
once every 7 years. What's the advantage? So I think a key part of this, I don't know that selling the district to the people within it will be that difficult, as long as we can come up with some means to either subsidize or pay for the hookups. There's still be, the hard part is going to be there's still going to be an increase, because you go from paying, say, $35 a year to paying $35 a month, or whatever that may end up being.
For the general maintenance of the system.
Well, yeah, just to even,
And the
I mean, if it's
retirement,
based on
yeah.
your water stuff, I mean, yeah,
Right,
you're
right.
going to have those kinds of considerations. So there's going to be some real tough challenges in selling it, I think, to the public. But the benefits, I think, absolutely outweigh those. As an elected official, though, I'm going to strive to, my position will be that we need to find funding, whether it's low interest government loans, to where we can help anybody within that district make that connection. I mean, ideally it'd be great if government could pay for that. If we could find some, I know it's pie in the sky, but if we could get federal dollars or something to allow our citizens to hook up to that, at least those that are in a hardship position.
In November, we're coming up on the 2-year mark of Measure C passing by the voters, a 0.5% sales tax for
Right.
6 years. What is your opinion of Measure C since its implementation, and what should the town be doing to prepare for when Measure C expires in another 4 years in order to maintain the present level of services in police, fire, and animal control?
Pretty good question. I'm totally excited about Measure C. I supported it when it was brought to the public. I'm one of the, and the current council were all in total agreement. The arguments against it were it's a general tax, it can be spent on anything. We promised everybody it would not be. It is not a special tax, but we told them our priorities. We've set up the oversight board, and we've lived by those priorities. There's been some misconceptions lately that well, it should all be percentaged out. It is not. It's based on priorities. Like the first year, we got $800 to $1 million bucks, and the first year we bought a fire engine, $250,000 plus. Year 2 we did $500,000 worth of road improvements that weren't, again, misconception. There was never to reconstruct the roads, which is multi-millions of dollars. It was simply to preserve the roads. It was kind of to hold on to them so they don't get worse for a while. It's my understanding everything in Measure C has been kept as a separate line item in the budget, both totally is separate, and it's you can see all the income and all the expenses, and it's broken out so that anybody can look at the budget and see that. Nothing is hidden. Money, is my understanding, in the surplus, we've done a couple of things. Initially, we were going to buy a fire engine and finance it for 10 years. And one of the things that I was challenged with by the editor of the newspaper was, why, if you only have money coming in for 6 years, would you buy something and finance it for 10? Made perfect sense to me. Took it back to staff and to the council, and we talked it over. So they changed that to where anything we buy is being bought either on a 6-year lease and where we're going to buy more police cars in year 3 or 4, where money is allocated for that so we can get up to full speed. The way that's working is if $1 million comes in, the payments for years 7, 8, and 9 are being put aside. It's not being dumped in the general fund. All of that is being saved. Now, the other concern that people have talked about is, we've had a couple of emergencies come up. We nearly had a fire at the police department. We found out that we had a generator that was undersized. We had a switch that was undersized. It came to a $90,000 repair. It was an emergency expenditure. So whether or not that money we have a reserve for the first time in a number of years that we've been building up in our general fund. So we have a general fund reserve, and we also are building a reserve in Measure C. So whether that emergency repair was taken out of the reserve funds in Measure C or not, it'll be replenished. I mean, it's not a slush fund. It's being carefully monitored, not only by us the five of us on the council, but also by that oversight board. And I think that we have a good plan in place for it to last. I know at least one of my colleagues would like to see it last. None of the extra money gets spent that comes in beyond what we allocate each year, and have it set aside so it will last us into year 4, 5, and 6. I'm also hearing a little bit of feedback in the community that people are so happy with the way things are going and what's happened as a result of having that funding, that I've heard already from the community that people are saying, well, gee, at the end of 6 years, we may not be opposed to it going on again. Mm-hmm. I know I was a huge advocate for putting the sunset clause in there, because I think it was, I'm not a forever, taxes should be forever kind of a guy.
Some of the money has been allocated for personnel, which, as you know, is an ongoing yearly expense. What about those resources? You talked a little bit about leases and the same philosophy.
And the fear is, the fear is that some of that would go away. I think that part of what's happening was we were at a really tough spot when we had done everything. We'd made every cut we could make. So we were at a place where we had to go to the public, and the most staunch conservatives who were on the council at the time agreed to that, and because we had done everything we could do to stay solvent. So we went to the public, they gave it to us, and that did allow us, because as you know, we were well understaffed in police and fire. CAL FIRE, when we made that contract, they've been working with us, and they've actually brought us back more savings than we've asked for. Now, we don't have control over their raises of their personnel. That's just a labor contract. But the other things is we've hired police officers and put some people in. We've been able to reestablish training. We'll be able to retain those people because they're not budgeted out of. We bought police cars and stuff. It allowed us to fill some positions immediately, but the economy is recovering, and our general fund is getting healthier year over year, to where we're not hiring beyond what we're going to be able to retain, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But that's, and based on the projection we're getting from finance, is that with a little bit of the upturn in the economy, in our regular general fund income, we think that, again,
you'll be able to absorb that in the general fund.
Right,
and
that's the plan, and that's what we're looking at.
Okay. Where do you stand on the statewide effort to legalize marijuana, and efforts such as Measure L to relax local marijuana regulations? Well, where do you
had to ask me that one, didn't you?
Because it does have, believe it or not, impacts on.
Oh, absolutely. It's. Gosh, it's a tough one. One thing I'm upset about Measure L, because they're putting their political signs up on things that illegally. I just think, it just bothers me. I can't do that. How come they can? And, I just think that, God, it's a tough one. I think marijuana is going to. I haven't read all of Measure L. I don't know what I watched a little bit of the county thing. I'm torn. I mean, I know people that use medical marijuana for real medical reasons, and it does give them relief. I'd rather them do medical marijuana than Oxycontin. But, I think it's, personally, I think that at some point, it's a prohibition. I know there's all kinds of things, pros and cons, but I just think it's just like prohibition. The reality is people are growing it, people are smoking it, people are using it, have been for years. I did when I was young. We're spending so much time and resource trying to fight a war against it that, when there's other drugs that really need to be fought. I just think it's inevitable. But I don't think it's just a statewide thing. I think that, the whole initiative process and everything that's come about in Colorado and Washington, I think the problem lies with the feds. It's just like prohibition back in that day with alcohol being banned. It didn't work. And they're ludicrous to think this is working. I mean, we're not spending any money on recovery for people that have addiction problems, be it alcohol or pot or anything else. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars or millions on fighting this. And I think the heroin epidemic and some of the illicit drugs, real actual street drugs, that's where maybe we need to spend our time and energy, and not on pot,
Okay.
How would you characterize the town's financial situation?
Well, it's a lot better now than it was 5 or 8 years ago. You know, we came through some really tough times. Again, our staff is like so dedicated. All the employees that, you know, 3 years ago, to balance a budget, we've had a balanced budget for the last 3 years. Actually, we started this year was the first year in a couple of years we started with a $35,000 deficit on June 30th. On July 1st when we began, that's been eliminated already. So, you know, our team, they budget absolutely conservative on revenue side, and they're extremely sharp penciled when it comes to expense side. I mean, everybody's done a great job doing less with more, or more with less. I mean, you know, I think we're not completely out of the woods, but we're pretty healthy right now. The dissolution of redevelopment, as well as the downturn in the economy and everything, really devastated us, and the state just really hurt us with that whole thing. We as a town, our reserve had been actually loaned to the RDA to begin that process, saying that the state didn't want to recognize those obligations and didn't want to let us get paid back. We're now getting paid back a little bit at a time. And we just recently got approval from the state to refinance the one loan that we had out that was coming due. So, you know, we're in a lot better shape. Like I say, we have a reserve in our general fund, which is, I've forgotten what it is. I think it's like somewhere between 8 and 11%. It's doing well. You know, I mean, compared to a few years ago, as you both probably know, it was. We had, when Alan came on the council a few years before me, there was no reserve, and I think when Chuck first got there, and so now there is.
Thank you.
That's good.
Okay, Steve, this is your opportunity to speak directly to the voters and let them know why they should support you on November the 8th.
Well, okay, everybody, you know, I think you all should support me because I've done what I said ever since 2004. I asked tough questions of the staff and of the citizens. I study the issues, and I tell the truth once I know it. And you know, I think we've done a good job. We've kept the town solvent. We've, you know, kept our employees. We've got some great employees. We've got a good environment to work in, and I'm available all the time. Now that I'm retired, I volunteer 99% of the time, and you know, I care about my community. I've lived here since 1981, and a vote for me would be kind of like just voting for your old Uncle George.
Steve, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.